Angled takeoffs. Hi, my name is Jordy, founder of the Independent Surfer, and today we're going to be talking about when and why you should angle your takeoff in surfing. So let's start with what angling your takeoff is. Well, it's pretty basic. Essentially, it's just paddling in at an angle, or while you're paddling in, changing your angle to turn your board before you stand up. And there's a couple reasons why you may want to do this. The reasons as to why you might want to do this may differ depending on whether or not you're a beginner, intermediate, or an advanced surfer. It also depends on the type of waves that you're surfing. Where you might angle a lot when the waves are really small, you might tend to angle less when the waves are slightly bigger. And the reasons that you're angling your takeoff will be slightly different depending on all of those factors. So let's start with a beginner surfer. For the most part, as a beginner surfer, you might want to angle your takeoff because it allows you to ride the wave down the line and follow the wave's direction without dropping to the bottom of the wave too quickly. You see, surfing a wave from top to bottom or vertically is more of an intermediate or an advanced way of surfing waves. And in the beginning, as a beginner, you're just trying to turn your board down the line versus as you get better, you can start to think about dropping to the bottom of the wave. Because what happens is if you just ride the wave straight and drop to the bottom, you'll kind of start to lose too much speed towards the bottom of the wave. And because you don't have total control over your board yet, you'll actually struggle to get back up to the top. And once you struggle to get back up to the top, the wave will kind of run off without you. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you to you, the sponsor of this video. Because of you watching this video, it means that we can make more videos to help you get better at surfing. So I really appreciate it. The last thing I want to say is if you want to really improve your surfing, then join us at one of our surf retreats or check out our online coaching where we can help you with so many things. You don't just need a video of yourself surfing, but I'd say the biggest problem that people have that we work with is honestly their pop-up. They're intermediates, they're trying to get better, and they just can't seem to progress. And most of the time it's because they're struggling with popping up. And if you just send us a video of you popping up in your living room, we can help you identify any sort of mistakes that you're making and just correct it so that, you can have a much easier time in the water. As an intermediate or advanced surfer, the reasons you might angle your takeoff will depend on the type of surf that you're surfing. So as an example, if you're an intermediate or an advanced surfer and you're surfing relatively small waves, maybe in the 1 to 3 foot range, I would say almost always, or you almost always want to angle your takeoff to stay in the highest part of the wave. Now, this goes a little bit further than that, and I wouldn't say you always want to angle your takeoff, but in those circumstances, you most likely want to be surfing the wave in the top half. So if the wave isn't quick down the line and you don't necessarily need to angle your takeoff right away, you probably want to get up and commit your bottom turn higher up the wave so that you avoid dropping down to the bottom. And I'll explain why in a sec. So when the waves are really small, what you'll see a lot of really good surfers doing is they'll be surfing the wave much more laterally than from the top to the bottom and back up to the top. And only when the wave is really punchy or the surfers are particularly good and they can speed generate in their bottom turn, are they able to surf the wave from the top to the bottom in really small conditions. And that's because when you drop down the wave's face in small conditions, you don't have a lot of time going from the top to the bottom, which means that you're not accelerating enough to carry a lot of speed to go from the bottom back up to the top. Remember that the bigger the wave is and the more time it takes for you to go from the top of the wave to the bottom, the faster you're going to go because of acceleration, right? Acceleration happens over time. Versus again, going back to it, if you're on a small wave, you don't have that much time, so you don't get that much acceleration, you don't get that much speed. And then in bigger waves, you have more time to drop from the top to the bottom, so you get more speed. So when it comes to Small waves, probably in the 1 to 3 foot range, a lot of the time you actually want to avoid going to the bottom too much and surf the wave much more laterally, where you're doing kind of carves and cutbacks, and snaps can be hard to do because you need to take deeper bottom turns. It is possible to take these deeper bottom turns and drop to the bottom of the wave, but you may want to get some momentum down the line first with the wave face before you kind of drop down to the bottom and then drop up to the top. It might be really difficult to do this right from the takeoff, and that's why you might want to consider angling your takeoff to kind of help you avoid dropping down to the bottom. So, when to do this, in most circumstances, if you're a beginner or a low level intermediate surfer, you probably want to do this most of the time because it helps you avoid getting stuck at the bottom in the beginning. As you get better, you can start to explore more or different lines or different ways you can approach a wave because it's really creative at the end of the day. It's totally up to you as to how you want to explore what the wave offers you. And then as you get better as an intermediate or advanced surfer, the biggest reason in smaller surf is because you want to get a lot of momentum. Like if you don't have enough speed, you're not going to be able to do turns. And in order to get that momentum, you need to kind of pump down the line a little bit first on really small waves, because remember that acceleration from the top to the bottom, you're not going to get a ton of acceleration. So that's one reason. It's like wave size and your ability and approach. And then obviously the other reason is dictated by the wave. Even in bigger surf, like some waves, you'll see the lip line will be really straight all the way across. And this is, if you aren't familiar, like this is the way that you tell what a wave is going to do down the line ahead of you. So obviously having a good understanding of how the specific wave that you surf reacts, like for example, if you go surf J-Bay, you know that way it's a really fast wave and you need to be surfing down the line most of the time. Versus if you go and surf like a bowly, I don't know, Ala Moana bowls or like some really bowly wave where you don't need to necessarily speed generate down the line very often, you can surf much more from the top to the bottom if you're a more advanced surfer. But what I'm getting at here is so that's one way to identify if a wave is going to be fast or not, is because waves have different sets of characteristics. Each wave that you go to is different. But in the moment, as you're paddling in, if you look down the line, what you'll notice is that the wave's top line, if the wave's top line tapers off a lot, then that's an indication that that wave isn't going to run down the line very quickly. Versus if that wave's top line is kind of the same gradient all the way across, that's indicating to us that that wave may either close out, or in most cases, like if you're actually able to surf the wave, that you need to probably angle your takeoff and consider getting down the line very quickly. Or if you end up seeing that wave taper, but you're behind the highest point of the wave, then you might also want to consider angling your takeoff. But in most cases, like especially when you're starting out as a surfer, as a beginner or a low-level intermediate, angling your takeoff more often than not will help you kind of avoid going straight and getting stuck at the bottom of the wave. And again, as I said before, once you get comfortable with turning the board down the line and maybe doing a few cutbacks, you can start to think about dropping all the way down to the bottom to do some more vertical approaches where you're doing like carves and snaps, for example. So the opposite is said as well. Like I said already, knowing when not to angle. Like in the beginning, you probably want to angle more often than not. As you get better, you can start to be more selective about this decision making. When you start to see sections that kind of taper off really quickly, angling your takeoff is not a good idea, because if you angle too quickly, then you're just going to kind of rush to the shoulder and not give yourself any space to get down the line. Or sorry, not any space to kind of utilize that section if you just kind of angle your takeoff and run away from the power source. One thing that I notice very consistently with beginners and like low level, even higher level intermediate surfers is they are often taking off on the shoulder. And I would say, like, as you get better at surfing, a big part of being able to explore a new approach, like trying to approach the wave more vertically, means that you are going to have to take off behind the peak much more consistently than you are maybe with where you're at right now. So if you feel like you are struggling and missing the best sections of the wave, it might not necessarily be just because of your ability to surf the wave, but it might also be your ability to read and know where to take off. So if this is you, then I challenge you to try and sit a little deeper than you've been sitting and try and take off behind the peak, utilizing that angled takeoff to carry speed down and around this first section to kind of do a turn right in the best part of the wave. Because a lot of people will actually, in this category, the beginner to intermediate level, will actually take off kind of where they should be doing their first turn because they're not comfortable and used to sitting a little bit deeper on the peak and utilizing that angled takeoff. Cool. So I guess into the nitty gritty, I guess you want to know how to angle your takeoff. So I would say the best approach to go by this is to just like touch on some common mistakes so you know what not to do. And that will help you kind of identify what to do. So I'd say the first mistake is obviously angling when you don't need to angle. And this is characterized by your proximity to like the wave's high point. If the wave it has a high point and you are quite far away from the high point, close to the shoulder, if you try and angle your takeoff in that circumstance, then you won't be able to catch the wave. However, like sometimes you might need to paddle into that specific area of the wave and then angle your takeoff once you've already caught it. What you can do in that situation is paddle into the wave straight. And while you're going to pop up, you can apply more weight to the rail of the direction that you want to go on. So if I'm paddling in and I want to go to the right, I might paddle in straight. And as I'm about to stand up, I'll apply more weight to my right rail because that's pretty much how you turn a board. Like you just have to apply weight to a specific rail and it will go in that direction. So if I want to go right, more weight to my right rail as I'm popping up. Some people might stagger their hands to do this. It's particularly hard to stagger your inside hand when you're going on the backhand. So it doesn't really matter. You don't have to stagger your hands. That's really just personal preference. But just more weight to that rail. And as I apply more weight to that inside rail, my board will slowly start to change direction as I'm about to stand up. So that by the time I'm up, I already kind of have an angle going with my board versus kind of catching the wave straight and then having to bottom turn right at the top of the wave to get down the line really quickly. So remember that if you are kind of on the shoulder and you're paddling in at an angle, chances are you won't be able to get into the wave. Another common pitfall is just like angling way too much. Like there is obviously only a certain amount of angle that you can apply to the board as you're paddling into the wave. And this has to do with the wave's momentum and the fins of the board as well. Like if the wave is pushing forward and your angle is like way too much, the wave will actually just kind of veer your board off towards that direction, and your momentum is going this way while the wave's momentum is rushing forward. So in some ways, it's almost better to start straight and then while you get a bit of momentum, start to angle over time. It can be very difficult to paddle in at an angle without having any momentum. So just try not to angle too much because what will happen is you'll just kind of end up being pushed off the back of the wave and it won't be successful for you. Another really common mistake with angling the takeoff is applying weight to the outside rail. So let's say you're paddling in, and as you paddle in, you're angling your takeoff really well. You start to get a little parallel to the wave. And then all of a sudden, if you're going to the left in this situation, and you start to apply weight onto your outside rail, that board will tip because there's like a lot of air underneath you and this rail is sticking into the wave face. That board will tip and the wave will kind of just throw you straight over. So you need to be really careful about how you apply weight to the rail. And in this case, like most of your weight needs to be applied to the inside rail so that you can stay engaged in the wave face. Again, applying weight to that outside rail will just cause you to tip over and eat it. You don't want to do that. Just make sure that you keep applying weight to that inside rail. The last thing I'll say is that it's really just like up to you as to what you want to do with the wave. Like I said in the beginning, like it all depends on your ability. In the very beginning stages of surfing, you probably want to try and angle your takeoff more often than not. Again, be careful that you don't over angle because then you won't be able to catch the wave. But it will really help you avoid dropping down to the bottom of the wave too quickly. And if you're in that intermediate or more advanced surfing stage, like angling your takeoff in small waves and surfing the wave in the top half of the wave is going to give you a much better opportunity to speed generate and do cutbacks, because in small waves, a lot of the time we're surfing waves very laterally versus bigger waves. You can start to take a much more vertical approach, especially when it comes to wanting to learn to do airs and hitting the end section really hard with a lot of speed. You really want to have a lot of momentum going down the line versus kind of momentum going top to bottom. Unless obviously the wave is big, powerful, and steep, then you actually need to drop down to the bottom of the wave to wipe off speed, because you can also go too fast, which will make it difficult for you to maneuver the surfboard.